Hello and welcome to the Bad Take. My name is Himal,
My name is Tamara.
and today we are going to talk about little green men.
Yeah. Unless you're in a Russian war zone, we all have a singular idea about what little green men means.
Right.
We use that as a sort of an endearing term for extraterrestrial life, alien life, I think.
Hmm.
But aliens and unidentified flying objects, we now treat that as a very familiar element in sci-fi, in pop culture. But there was a time this was quite new, and this craze started in 1940s first, and that's when the term UFO was coined. Do you know the story, Ma?
No, tell us.
Right. Okay. So there was an amateur pilot. This guy's name was Kenneth Arnold.
Hmm.
He was on his way to an air show in Oregon, I think. He was on his plane, flying his plane, and close to Mount Rainier, which is in Washington, this guy saw a flash of blue light, and he thought it was a little odd at first, but then he thought it could be sunlight just glinting off another plane. But he looked at the radar, and there were no other planes nearby, and he kept looking a little more, and he saw 9 more flashes of light, and he was curious. He found this very odd, and he thought he would report this to the media because it was quite a new thing. And when he talked to the reporters the next day, he said that these lights were bouncing off across the sky like a saucer would if you skip it across the water. So he was just referring to the movement that the light was making because it was so fast. And the reporter then did something which the Atlantic calls one of the most significant reporter misquotes in history.
Hmm.
So this guy wrote his article saying that this pilot had seen a saucer-like object moving across the sky. But in reality, that's not at all what this guy Kenneth Arnold meant. He just wanted to say that the movement was like a saucer would if you skip it across the water. But the reporter thought he was referring to the shape of the object, the light itself. And all the other media came onto it, and they started saying, they actually coined this term flying saucers, which was a more catchy term to refer to the whole thing. And after that, a lot of people around the country started seeing flying saucers, seeing flashing lights. It was like everybody wanted a piece of that attention to themselves, so they started reporting stuff like that over and over again. And this went on for a while, and to add insult to injury, so this was in 1947 June. And in July, a farmer in Roswell, New Mexico, reported that he captured one of these flying saucers, and there was some debris lying in a corner of his field, and he said it came from the sky, and he captured this. So a lot of stories started developing around this, and people started talking about flying saucers and alien beings visiting from other planets. And in the 1956, I think, a US Air Force officer named Edward Ruppelt coined this term UFO, unidentified flying object, because he thought that was a more general term to refer to all the objects and the lights people were seeing in the sky. So it
sounds a little bit more respectable than
saucers. So that's how the term came into popular discourse.
You mentioned Roswell. And you said a farmer claimed to have captured a flying saucer. Was that?
Yeah, that was the initial story.
Oh, really?
That he went with.
Okay, no. There are, I think, different stories, right? Something about a body being discovered. And
there are all sorts of stories, and there are photos and video footage of charred alien bodies.
Yeah, I mean, all doctored, of course.
Yeah, doctored, of course. Yeah. And the funny thing there is debris was found of a vehicle of some sort, but it turned out it was actually a weather balloon of some sort, developed by the US military, by the US Air Force. The funny thing is that was not the actual truth, because in the 90s, the US Air Force actually more or less admitted that it was a surveillance balloon.
Right.
It was carrying some surveillance equipment that they were using to spy on the Soviets. But when the story came out, and the whole alien story started developing, they didn't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, so they also went with it. And only after 40 or 50 years did they admit the actual truth.
Right. So what they actually found was some tinfoil and some sticks and things like that. Like basically, what you would expect to find at a weather balloon
Yeah.
crash site, right?
Yes, exactly. We don't know all the iterations the story went through, so there must have been other details that we missed that would have proved this to be a bogus story. But anyway, the point is, people started talking about these things and they started developing their own narratives and their own stories around seeing spaceships and lights and being abducted in extreme cases.
Kind of makes you wonder why nobody ever thought of asking why an extraterrestrial intelligence would come all the way to Earth only to crash land in
Yes.
fucking New Mexico, right? Like, I mean, some
Yeah,
backwater.
they
No.
figured out everything to
Yeah.
like they had all the technology they needed to travel across the galaxy, but they couldn't land properly.
Like, we're talking about vast spaces, and they come
Yeah.
here and they can't even fucking land properly. And also, apparently, they come here to abduct and anally probe
Yeah.
rednecks. I mean, like, why? I mean, why would they waste all their resources just to do that?
Right.
I mean, these are questions that I guess the media didn't really bother asking
Mm.
back then.
Yeah, because they just wanted a story, right?
Right.
Do we know of any local stories like this? I mean, Roswell is world famous,
Yeah.
and there are so many other examples that we can give when it comes to alien abductions or sightings. But what do you know about Sri Lanka?
I mean, you get the odd story in the papers every now and then, and occasionally on TV, I think on Live at 8 on Zwarnawahini, I've seen footage, very questionable footage of flashing lights
Right.
recorded with a mobile phone or whatever. And I
Mm.
mean, I don't think anyone really took that stuff very seriously.
Yeah. There are people who take the subject very seriously in Sri Lanka.
No, you can take the subject very
Yeah.
seriously, but I'm talking about these actual claims
Right.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
seeing UFOs
Mm.
in the sky. Or I mean, I don't think there's been any incident reported in Sri Lanka that made headlines internationally, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly there haven't been any abduction stories. People
No,
haven't
no, there
gone
haven't
that
been.
far.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
not yet anyway.
But one thing that I did notice was I actually had a look at all these reported incidents that have been there in the past, and there's a website called UFO Hunters. They kind of keep track of.
Sri Lankan website?
No, it's a
Oh, okay.
international website, but I think you can report to them
Mm.
if you claim that you saw something. And the latest account that I found on that from Sri Lanka was in 2017.
What was the story?
It was just a sighting near, I think, Anuradhapura or Veyangoda, I forget,
Right.
one of the two. But one thing that I did notice was many of these claims that are coming out of Sri Lanka, they claim that these things happen around places with some historical significance and
Mm.
ruins from earlier civilizations like Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa,
Mm.
Dimbulagala, all these places. And they claim that the people who take this stuff seriously, they claim that aliens are coming here to study the techniques and the secrets of the ancients,
Right.
to find out how they built all these huge structures and stuff like that.
Mm.
Which again I find absurd because
So what
If-
they skip Egypt and the pyramids and
Yeah.
they come here straight. Okay, well, that makes sense.
and they have all the technology they need to travel across galaxies, and they come here to like learn how to build buildings.
And stupas. Okay.
that's funny. But anyway, that seems to be a narrative that most people are very happy to go with. At least the guys who bring out the stories. Yeah, there's a person, I forget his name, but he writes books about these conspiracy theories. I actually read one of his accounts, in which he has, along with a couple of his friends and some villagers, they camped out
Hmm.
near Parakram Samudra,
Okay.
and they were looking for these spaceships and flashing lights, and they apparently they saw some, but they couldn't go into the thick jungle to find out what it was. You get people making all sorts of these claims, and we do have to be really skeptical in giving them any value, but we can't really deny the fact that extraterrestrial life might exist, right?
No, it's
That's
certainly a
what it is.
possibility that they exist. I mean, it's a very good chance that they exist. It's just that,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got smartphone these days, right? Like,
Yeah.
with HD or 4K video recording, and strangely, no compelling footage of
Mm-hmm.
anything yet.
Yeah. There's a big collective in the US called MUFON,
Yeah.
Mutual UFO Network. These guys, they're quite serious. They publish a journal and a yearly book about interesting cases of UFO sightings and encounters. And I actually read on their website that they receive between 500 to 1,000 UFO reports a month from all over the world. They keep a record of it, and they have a live map of UFO encounters and stuff. So you
Right.
can go and check out their website, which is really intriguing. But then again,
I've read that SETI, when they get calls, they just kind of prefer people to.
oh yes, they
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
They do. Yeah. Not just MUFON, there are some other collectives as well, mostly in the US, I think, because they kind of seem to be obsessed with this.
Hmm.
In a way, they do important work because they actually keep a record of, like you said, if SETI misses something, they can then refer to these groups and see if they have recorded
Right.
the same phenomena, and then get some reading out of it,
SETI being the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
which we will talk about.
Yeah, we'll get
at
to
a
that in
later
a bit.
point. Yeah. Before we go there, I just want to ask you, say that we someday get to see that point of first contact, the aliens visiting us,
Right.
and if you had a chance to meet them, what do you want them to look like?
That's a weird question. What would I want? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we all have our own image of
Yeah.
what they might look like,
Yeah.
right? And
Little green men being the
being the popular,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, but that's kind of dated now, I think,
It
right?
is, yeah.
I mean,
I think it started in the 40s.
yeah.
It's
Little green Martians.
even before that, there
Yeah.
was I think the first reference to little green men came from this book, this story called Maya's Little Green Men,
Okay.
which was included in a book titled Weird Tales by Harold Lawler
Right.
in 1946. That's the first reference that I
Okay.
could find, and from that it kind of looks like some other author saw this and saw some potential in the concept,
Right.
used the same thing again, and it kind of
Mhm.
spread that way. But even in a lot of popular sci-fi installments, we see these aliens with huge heads and elongated eyes and small mouths.
Yeah.
This stereotypical
Right.
alien figure that's what they use. That's
Right.
the go-to.
Yeah. I mean, we can really never know, right?
Yeah.
And life, I mean, we kind of look at it from a very human perspective, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it may be something that we might not even recognize as life.
True.
And so until and unless we actually encounter them, there's really no way to tell. So over the decades, aliens, as we have come to call them, have varied in appearance.
Yeah.
Especially in pop culture and sci-fi movies and television. What are some of the more realistic, quote-unquote realistic portrayals of aliens?
Let me put aside the realistic element for a little bit, because
Okay.
I have no reference point to go
Yeah,
by.
exactly.
Um,
Because we have no clue, right?
let's talk about interesting
Right.
depictions of aliens.
Okay.
One thing that I quite liked was, of course, the classic Ridley Scott's Xenomorph,
Right.
which is kind of an extreme version of a violent, predatory creature,
Yeah.
which is terrifying and foreboding in a way, but also
I mean, it was until he went back and screwed it up with Prometheus.
I
You
kind
like?
of
Oh my
like
God, you like Prometheus?
I get why it's getting a lot of hate, but I didn't hate it that much.
You didn't have a problem with the concept of engineers, that whole thing? You
Weirdly, no, I actually
didn't? Okay.
liked it.
You liked it? Okay.
Yeah. But okay, let's come to that in a different discussion.
I thought that was a very strange choice, but yeah, I
Right.
mean, yeah.
So that has left a lasting impact on pop culture, the Xenomorphs. But a recent, very interesting depiction of aliens I saw was in Arrival,
Oh yeah, that was great.
the 2017 movie,
Right.
16, which the creature was sort of a heptapod, like a
Like a
seven-legged creature.
Yeah.
It's quite large. I mean, a lot larger than a human being, and they had to stay in this sort of containment chamber almost. They couldn't. I don't remember exactly, but I think they could not stand the Earth's atmosphere, so they had to
Right.
be in some sort of a special chamber in their spaceship, and they had this language they were using that allowed them to have a very different perception of time than we have, and there was this whole concept that they developed, which I quite liked, which didn't come from the movie, of course. It came from the short story which it was based on,
Right.
called Story of a Life by Ted Chiang, which you haven't read, you should. So it's a story in a collection of really good short stories. The collection is called Stories of Your Life and Others. I quite like that depiction, but one thing that I find funny is how Star Wars,
Yeah.
Star Trek, even Men in Black, they kind of have this very disturbing, hideous, unpleasant look about them, right? The aliens, it's like when
Not
you
necessarily in Star Wars. Maybe yeah, any Men in Black for sure.
yeah. I don't mean all the creatures, but
Some
most
of them.
of
Yeah,
them. It kind of it's almost like we want them to be like it's almost like we have sort of established ourselves as the perfect being, and they are at least in our eyes imperfect in some way. I kind of find that funny because it signals some sort of a superiority complex, I think.
yeah. Right.
But yeah, what do you think? What are the depictions that you like?
I mean, I didn't really. I wasn't a huge fan of Arrival. I mean, I thought it was. I mean, as the film, I didn't. I wasn't crazy about the script, but I thought the concept of the creatures was very interesting. It was something unusual. I think something that had never been done before in cinema.
Right.
And that whole thing about the linguistics and all that was fascinating.
What did you think of the non-biological extraterrestrials in Transformers?
But even that Allspark thing, wasn't there some kind of biological beginning to the? I know they're robots, but surely somebody built them, right? Some organic.
Right.
Yeah. Do we know about the genesis? I'm not a huge Transformers person, so I don't really know about the
Me
background.
neither.
Okay.
Just
My favorite, I suppose, would be that South African District 9. I can't remember any of the movies I've seen, so throw some names at me.
Independence Day.
Independence Day. Yeah, when Will Smith famously punches that alien. That was cool. But that was another instance of those really lizard-like,
Yes. Yeah.
slimy creatures, right?
Yes.
Like, I think that's more interesting than the typically humanoid types that look
Right. Yeah.
too much like us, right?
Mm.
That's. I mean, I don't know. Your kind of suspension of disbelief ends there. Yeah, they look so much like us to the point that they may as well be human. What about literature?
Since we also talked about Sri Lanka a little bit, one name that I can think of is, of course, Arthur C. Clarke.
Right.
I do have to confess, though, I've only read Rendezvous with Rama,
Oh, okay.
and that was
Oh, that was very interesting. That was good. And childhood and
right.
that.
So, okay, talk to me a little bit about Arthur C. Clarke's perception of extraterrestrial life and why you like it all.
I mean, it depends. It depends on the book, I suppose. In
Right.
2001, have you seen the movie?
I've seen the movie. Yes.
Okay, so the book and the movie were written, I think, simultaneously. Like,
Right.
according to that version of the story, humanity was kind of gifted with not necessarily intelligence, that like an alien intelligence kind of like prodded us in the right direction. Like they didn't come here and like
Yeah.
tell us how to teach us how to use tools or anything like that, but that the presence of that monolith,
Yes. Yeah.
it kind of guided us in the right way. Like
Right.
I think that's what he was going for.
Okay.
Childhood's End, on the other hand, had a completely different take, where an alien spaceship arrives, it enters into some kind of understanding with our political leadership, and
Right. Like the Vulcans.
yeah, and before you know it, Earth becomes paradise, a utopia.
Right. Okay.
But they come with an ulterior motive, which I won't get into because it's going to be a huge spoiler.
Right.
But in that, I think there's a TV series based on that now, which is not as good as the book. But I mean, if you can't be bothered reading the book, might as well check it out. It's a mini series of about 10 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So the depiction of aliens in that was very interesting in that the alien looked the alien was basically something that would have looked very familiar to humans, from not just from today, but even from centuries ago. I can't tell more without spoiling it. So,
but does he go into great detail about how their appearance and how they conducted themselves?
Again, in Childhood's End, like there's one word to describe the alien appearance, and that would give away everything. There's no point talking about.
Is there any other notable literature that you've recently finished reading
The Hyperion.
Hyperion,
Yeah,
yeah.
Hyperion by Dan Simmons. It's that's something we can talk about later on, because it's about humanity, like kind of evolving and adapting to life in space. The aliens, I mean, they are present in the story, but they are not very relevant to the overall narrative.
Right.
It's more about how humans kind of progress over the next 1,000 or 2,000 years and spread across the galaxy, and we will get back to that later, because that's something I want to address. So,
Right,
yeah.
sure, of course. Okay, moving on. Now, we've had this obsession with aliens and extraterrestrial life for ages now, and it's evident in all these movies and books that we put out.
Oh.
But where actually are they?
Yeah, where are they? There is the big question.
Isn't there an equation developed to find out how many...
The Drake equation.
The Drake equation, exactly. I think it
Shall we break it down? N equals R times FP times NA times FL times FI times FL FC times L.
Yep, that's right. So it's got 8 terms.
Yeah.
Let's just
N being the number of broadcasting civilizations.
That's what we want to find out. So
Yes.
that's the purpose of the equation.
So, which is a function of the R being the average rate of formation of suitable stars. Well, this only applies to the Milky Way,
Galaxy,
right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
The fraction of stars that form planets, the average number of habitable planets per star, the fraction of habitable planets where life emerges, the fraction of habitable planets with life where intelligent evolves, the fraction of planets with intelligent life capable of interstellar communication, and lastly L being the number of years a civilization remains detectable. So when you do the math, it's a huge number, right? This equation was developed by Frank Drake in 1960.
He was an astronomer.
At the National Radio Astronomy Observatory.
Right.
In West Virginia.
There is an updated version of the Drake equation that scientists are using now. So the equation that we mentioned earlier, it's called the classical Drake equation, or CDE. But in 2010, an astronomer called Claudio Macon came up with an updated version of this. He calls this the statistical Drake equation, or SDE. It has got more math in it, which I don't necessarily understand.
Let's not get into that. Yeah.
It incorporates a standard variation into the equation. And when the calculation is done, there are about 4,590 civilizations within the Milky Way galaxy that they think would harbor life.
Are these actual civilizations or planets that are capable of harboring life? Not necessarily intelligence life or any life? Or
this is intelligent life. Because the purpose of the
Drake equation is to find exactly.
A civilization which is advanced enough to be able to emit radio signals.
Okay, right.
So that's what we were looking for. The crucial thing about the equation is the term L, which is the years a civilization remains detectable.
Right.
We actually have no idea what that time frame is. We don't really have a good idea about it.
I think that's where the great filter comes in, right?
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. But let's get back to that later.
Yeah, so basically if L is big enough, it basically renders the other terms in the equation unusable, because then it could come to a point where N equals L.
Right.
In fact, Drake himself has alluded to this fact, because apparently his the number plate on his car reads N equals L. So yeah, that's where Claudio Macon comes in, and the standard variation comes in. And right now, I think a safe estimate that they go to is about 4,950 within the Milky Way.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where we are right now.
Okay, so where are they? Why have we not heard anything from these civilizations which, according to this equation, are capable of communicating or at least sending out radio signals?
That is a paradox, right?
Yeah, it's called the Fermi paradox.
It's called the Fermi paradox,
yes.
Enrico Fermi, the Italian physicist,
Yeah.
he was the guy who suggested this, and basically it is the disconnect between evidence for extraterrestrial life
and the sheer possibility
and
of it.
the very high probability. If you just look at the numbers of, if you just look at the size of the universe.
Let's talk about the size of the universe. Like in our galaxy alone, there are, the lower estimate is 200 billion stars.
200 billion stars.
and if you move out of our galaxy within the local group and the cluster, and if you take the whole if you take the entire observable universe, there is something like 70 sextillion stars.
Yes.
That
again is the low estimate. I think the higher estimate is 260 or something like that.
Yeah.
There is a nice thought experiment that you can do. You love the beach, right?
Yes.
So when you go to the beach next time, just take a handful of sand grains into your hand and try to isolate just one sand grain. I think it measures about 0.5 millimeter across.
Right.
And then try to just imagine all the sand grains in all the beaches on Earth.
Yeah.
There are more stars in the galaxy, in the universe, in the observable universe, than there are sand grains on Earth, which which is
easy to fucked on basically. Yeah.
It's easy to say that, but it's really hard to imagine that, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't have a problem interacting with small numbers like thousands or
even up to 1 million we can comprehend, but beyond that, beyond the billions. It's
no, the thing is, even a million, we can do some math on paper.
Exactly. Yeah, even the billions.
But you can't imagine, say for example, if you take 10 pens, you can just imagine how it lays on a tabletop or whatever.
Right.
100 maybe you can do.
Yeah.
1,000, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And beyond that, it's very difficult to imagine the sheer appearance of it, the depiction of it.
Yeah.
You can't. Your mind just doesn't have the capacity to do that. When you go to 200 billion and 200 sextillion, it's just impossible. So even though we can just say these numbers out loud, I don't think anyone has, even scientists who deal with this stuff regularly, have a very good idea about how big these numbers are. They're very hard to
fathom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to illustrate the vast difference between a million and a billion, 1 million seconds is equal to 11 days.
Right.
Guess how many days, or guess how long 1 billion seconds is?
You said 11 days, right?
Yeah. 1 million seconds equals 11 days. And 1 billion seconds is? Any guess? Any idea?
11,000 days is how much? How many years? I don't know. I can't math right now. How much is it?
31 years.
Fuck.
That's the difference between a million and a billion.
Right. Okay.
11 days versus 31 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's unimaginably huge.
Yes. It does put things in perspective.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. And it speaks to the fact that we can't really understand these numbers just by looking at them. So
the size of the universe is something that is actually beyond our comprehension. You don't even have to go as far as the universe. Just take our own galaxy. 200 billion stars is nothing to sneeze at. That's a crazy number of stars.
And within the Milky Way galaxy, we estimate that there are about 20 billion potentially Earth-like planets.
Yeah. And how many of them are habitable, do we know? Potentially?
That number is the number of planets which is in the Goldilocks zone within a star system.
Yeah.
So
and every year we are discovering more and more planets.
We're discovering more. And the other thing is the universe is expanding.
Exactly.
New stars are being born, new planet systems are... Now, these take millions and billions of years, but I think the universe doubles in size every 20 billion years or so. That's the calculation they've done. So there are there's enough room for life to exist. And if you think about those numbers, it's in a way, it's very selfish and egocentric to think that
we are alone, right?
That we are alone, yeah.
Even if you leave aside the philosophical implications of it, just the probability alone is.
Exactly.
Chances are there is something or someone out there, right? But there is this great, big, deafening silence.
Yeah.
We just haven't heard anything. I think that is what the Fermi paradox seeks to address.
Yeah.
Which is kind of depressing in a way. If you are a believer, if you really want to believe that there is something out there, that we are not truly alone, you really hit a snag when you try to understand why there is no communication at all from the great beyond.
I think one thing we do have to understand is that simply considering the distances involved,
right?
Even if we were to find something, it would take hundreds of years of...
No, but here's the thing. The universe has existed long enough for intelligent life not only for it to have evolved, for it to have become spacefaring. And at this point, our entire galaxy should have been colonized by any number of advanced enough civilizations. But that is just not the case. On a long enough timeline, assuming that a civilization doesn't self-destruct or isn't wiped out because of some other catastrophe or whatever, chances are they would evolve and develop into a spacefaring civilization. And as a population grows, it makes sense that you kind of move out of your home planet and, colonize, first starting with your own solar system, and then maybe your local area, and then you kind of spread your wings across the galaxy. That has not happened. They have had 13 billion years to do this, and it has not happened, which leads scientists like Fermi and a lot of skeptics to believe that maybe there is nothing out there.
What if they're out there and they never found us interesting enough to come and visit? That is actually one of the considerations of the paradox. There are 4, I think. One is that, like you mentioned, that there is a good possibility that a lot more other civilizations have evolved to a point where they have figured out space travel and interstellar travel, but there is always a possibility that they haven't.
Because there are so space travel is hard.
Exactly. There are so many variables. You have to figure out the engineering. You have to figure out a way to support life for the duration of the journey.
Right.
You have to figure out the ways to navigate to the places you want to go to. So that is one caveat. The other thing is what I just mentioned. But if they did, maybe they saw us, then they thought they saw the way we were destroying the planet and warring with each other, and they just thought us to be
fuck these guys.
extremely primitive and nonsensical. They just ignored us. That is one possibility. And it's also possible that advanced civilizations evolved far too recently for them to have come all this way. And
it took us 4 billion years here on Earth.
And or maybe they visited us in the past and we didn't really have the means to record that or to understand that.
Or they destroyed themselves long before they could.
Right. Or maybe they engineered us and sent us here.
And we're all living in a simulation? No, okay, that's a different episode. But here's the thing though. I mean, I like I said, I really want to believe that they're out there, but the more you think about it, the more abundantly clear it is to me that you've heard of the great filter, right? Like it's another one of those theories that kind of
talk to me about the great filter, because I do have a little difficulty understanding where
so it basically it's about anything that prevents the rise of life from dead matter. Life kind of came from nothing, right? If you think about it, I mean, it just kind of arose on the planet. Molecules developed into cells and they became self-replicating, and thus life arose. We don't really know how it began, right?
Yeah.
There are all sorts of theories.
Yeah, the best theory we have is somehow, I have no expertise in this, and I don't know the terminology to use, but somehow cells interacted in a way that gave rise to amino acids, which is the basis of DNA, and then went on like that.
But what exactly sparked that, we don't really know.
I don't think
we
know that,
So anyway, the great filter kind of discusses what might prevent something like that from occurring.
Right.
From life kind of rising out of material that isn't living. Or once life emerges and once it starts to evolve, a point will come when it will either die out. So you hit a peak intelligence, right? And as a civilization, and after, there's a point will come when you either self-destruct, you become the victim of some kind of natural disaster, and your civilization, your existence comes to an end.
Right.
What the great filter, I think it was derived from Fermi paradox. It kind of states that it's either behind us, as in we've moved on from the great filters and therefore we are safe, or it's ahead of us.
Right.
So chances are it's probably ahead of us, given what's happening, what we are doing to the planet right now, and the possibility of mutually assured destruction with our nuclear arsenals of respective countries. Where the great filter applies to our discussion is that what was the number we came up with?
4,000. Let's say 5,000.
Yeah, in our galaxy. If you apply the great filter to those civilizations, there's a very good chance they either didn't evolve to that point.
Okay.
Life there was kind of extinguished at the very beginning with not enough time to evolve into a spacefaring civilization. Or the other possibility, like you said, is that they have and they just don't bother.
Right. So, which is kind of sad in a way.
Yeah, and even so, our radio signals are now out there, right?
Yeah.
Like anybody listening in will,
Yes.
And we've been listening for how long now? Since the 1960s at least, right? SETI.
60s.
The search for extraterrestrial intelligence was established in the 60s, right?
In 1960, I think.
Yeah.
By Carl Sagan and Frank Drake.
Right. And we've been listening for so many decades, and we still haven't heard anything, not a single fucking thing.
Except that one time in 1979.
That one time in 1979, which is I don't know.
We
I
don't
have
know
my
what that
doubts
is.
about that.
Yeah, no,
You're talking about the wow signal,
wow
right?
signal,
Okay,
yes.
let's just talk about that.
1977 this was not actually SETI. It was heard by the Big Ear Radio Telescope
Right.
in Ohio State University. So the scientist who was working on this project, he noticed this abnormal signal, and which was in no way, he couldn't explain it, how it happened, or even figure out what had happened for them to have recorded it. So he just wrote the word wow next to the printout, and then people just started using the wow signal to refer to it.
Yeah, but the problem with the wow signal is that they were never able to replicate it, right? Like
exactly, and we don't know why it happened that one time.
Just at one time, and they never heard it again.
No.
So that's kind of a problem, right? Like it needs to be. I mean, that's how science works. It needs to be kind of repeatable, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I don't know. Aliens are just teasing us, and they will send another signal in another million years, and then a Vogon spaceship will come.
Do we know that it could have been from like a pulsar or like from? We don't know that.
We don't know. Yes, exactly. We don't have an explanation. We have no idea how it happened.
Right.
There are so many theories.
Right. So this is the one maybe example.
Close call.
Yeah, a close call if you want to call it. But other than that, there is absolutely nothing, right? Like zero evidence.
Yeah.
So what can we conclude from that? That are we really alone? Like in this vast, humongous universe where we are smaller than a tiny speck of dust. And that's just like in our own like local area. Like we are so small, like it's so insignificantly small that it makes your head spin. It makes you. I mean, if you think about it for too long, you can get a little depressed.
To put things in context, if you haven't already, you should check out The Pale Blue Dot.
Oh yeah, God.
That if you don't have time to read the whole book, just look at that excerpt, and we will link this in.
Yeah, I think there's a nice video on YouTube where Carl
Sagan reads it himself, which is just it just hits you.
Yeah, it's you right in the feels. Yeah, right in the feels.
So you should definitely listen to it. It just puts into perspective how insignificant we are in the universe, in our own solar system, and.
But that's also because we are kind of searching for some kind of meaning, some significance. That's also another very human thing, right? I mean,
it's a very romantic endeavor.
Yeah, but okay, so why? I mean, is life and intelligence is it really that important? Is it significant? I mean, we are clearly an accident, right?
Yeah,
we're a cosmic accident. There are so many factors that contribute to our existence that, like, we're probably the luckiest planet there is. I mean, life wouldn't exist. I mean, for one thing, we are in the Goldilocks zone. And of course, that enables life. We have liquid water. We have an atmosphere. Far enough from the sun that it's not too hot, not too cold. But that alone is not enough. We have Jupiter to thank for. Because Jupiter, being the huge gas giant that it is, with its immense gravitational pull, it's constantly pulling asteroids and comets that may otherwise come and hit us.
Yeah.
Which would have, if any possibility of life would have been extinguished right at the start. If it weren't for Jupiter, and also the moon. There are all these factors that enable our existence. And again, if you look at the numbers, it's probable that it's repeated somewhere else in the universe. Maybe not in our galaxy, maybe in some other galaxy. But again,
but then again, I think what keeps people going, especially these scientists who work on these things day in and day out, is the fact that it's just faith, really, that this accident could happen somewhere else, just because of the sheer size.
Yeah, and given enough time, it could happen. I mean, the universe is 13 plus billion years old.
Yeah, 13.8.
That is a long ass time.
Yes.
Life may be, I don't know, at least, okay, maybe there's multicellular life out there. Maybe there's very primitive kinds of life out there.
And that's one other thing that we should mention. We are looking for intelligent life, of course.
But why are we looking for intelligent life? Why is intelligence so special? Like,
I think we are kind of excited at the prospect of, just talking to an alien or communicating with an alien being who has no idea what any place on Earth is. They have had a completely different experience in a different environment. I think that even when you meet someone from outside the country, right, you have a lot of things to explore, to talk about. I think that is there in a much more grander scale if you are lucky enough to meet someone from outside the planet.
Alien
think
culture
we are-
clash.
Yeah, we are kind of excited at that prospect, I think, which is also romantic in a way. And it's not just that we want to give them an idea about what we have. That's why we sent out the Voyager with a golden record in it with pictures and sound recordings and flakes of life from Earth for anyone who's out there to discover it. So I think we are kind of desperate in that way.
Yeah, I
To
was
find
going to say
something.
that. I mean, do you think it comes from a very desperate need to not be alone?
I think so, yeah, because even at a macro level, we always want to belong, right?
Right.
That's why some people find that in religion, some people find that in friends or relations. We always want to be part of something, part of something bigger than us, and being a part of a bigger universe would be the ultimate manifestation of it.
And yet, for the longest time, some of the more prominent religions thought we were the center of the universe and
Right.
that we were God's only creation and
Mm-hmm.
God's only intelligent creation. And do you think discovering something like that? I mean, okay, I don't want to bash any religions here, but like, do you think making some kind of first contact,
Mm-hmm.
or at least finding any kind of evidence that there is something out there, do you think that would kind of fundamentally change our outlook on life here on Earth?
I think it definitely will. If you want to talk about religion specifically, there was a nice article that I read yesterday where a lady talks to the person who wrote it. She talks to a rabbi, a Catholic priest, and an imam.
Is this a joke? A rabbi, a Catholic priest, and an imam go
Walk into a
bar.
bar.
Okay, and
Yeah, and they kind of discuss what would happen if they find
right.
some other civilization out there, and all of them agree that it's not outside the purview of their respective religion to think of something like that. And I think honestly there will be it will be a shock to everyone here on Earth, and people will won't be easy to come to grips with it right away, but people will religions will find
Some kind of explanation.
some
and people will just move on. You think?
exactly. I mean the
I mean,
church,
it's great. Okay, there are aliens. So
yeah,
then
the
we move
church
on.
shunned Galileo at first,
Yeah.
but then they
Right.
kind of took him in. So I just think they will find a workaround to keep on dishing out their dogmatism, whatever happens. It will be the biggest discovery in our time, right? If that happens, like, we don't know the risks that will be involved with. We have no idea what would happen. It will be a completely new experience. But since we are evolved to adapt, I think we'll find our ways around it, and so will our ideologies.
Yeah. So with that sobering thought, we'll wrap this up. Please let us know what you guys think. Are you believers or skeptics? I think it was Arthur C. Clarke who said this, that two possibilities exist.
Mm-hmm.
Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. And he and I too find either possibility terrifying.
Yeah.
So we'd like to know where you guys stand on this.
Mm-hmm.
So reach out to us maybe on Twitter, on Facebook, or wherever.
Yeah, I myself remain an optimist. Actually, I would
Yeah, me too, I suppose, to an
love
extent.
to see something
Yeah.
like that happen, but yeah, we don't know. And
We don't know.
the actual answer is that we
don't
know
We don't
what
know.
will
It's-
happen.
I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah, speculating on it for days on end will not do any.
But that's all we can
good
do
for
right
it. Yeah,
now.
that's all we can do. But then
Yeah,
we
it's
are-
fun to speculate.
Yeah, but we should also like mention that there are thousands of people working on these things
Yeah.
day in and day out, and they are doing a thankless job.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just passion driving them, I think.
Mm.
And there was a time when I wanted to be somewhere like that. I
Yeah.
wanted to, like, I think everyone when
I
they
think
were
most of
small,
us did. Like anyone of us who grew up reading science fiction.
yeah,
Yeah.
at some point they wanted to be
Yeah.
an astronaut or a scientist, or
Yeah.
kudos to them.
Yep.
And we'll end with that thought. See you guys in the next one.
All right. Peace. The Bad Take podcast is brought to you by nobody. This is solely a self-funded endeavor. We're not asking for funds either, don't worry. But do give us a shout on social media. And if you use any podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts or whatever, just maybe give us a rating.
Basically, just let us know what you honestly think.
We
And
welcome constructive criticism.
Mhm.
Whatever
you-
feedback you have.
If you enjoy these conversations, we would really appreciate if you could share them
Yeah.
with your friends and let them know what you like or dislike about them.
Yeah, I mean, we're not making any money out of this. We're just having fun.
Hope you are too.
Yeah. Thank you.